The White House put out a statement overnight on Twitter, of course, rather than through the whitehouse.gov website. I'm going to read it for you now. It's from Dan Scavino from inside the White House. It says, "Statement by President Donald J. Trump on the electoral certification." Here's the direct quote. "Even though I totally disagree with the outcome of the election and the facts bear me out, nevertheless, there will be an orderly transition on January 20th. I have always said we would continue our fight to ensure that only legal votes were counted. While this represents the end of the greatest first term in presidential history, it's only the beginning of our fight to make America great again," end quote, end of statement. So, according to Trump, in his direct quotation from the White House, from the Twitter account of the White House staff, Dan Scavino specifically, he says he'll leave. There'll be an orderly transition on January 20th. He doesn't say whether he'll still be there, but he says that the transfer of power, the constitutionally mandated transfer of power, constitutionally set to occur on January 20th, will occur as scheduled, as constitutionally mandated. This is a really good thing, obviously. Now, does that tell us what he will do between now and then? He is literally, by the way, as I noted on Twitter last night, and I was on a roll, so I hope you'll go check out at JT Larson. But as I noted, yesterday was the day to give your 2 weeks notice if you were going to leave on January 20th. So he literally gave his 2 weeks notice one day late, which is just perfect for Donald Trump to do what you're supposed to do, only after everyone tells you to do it wrong, do it late, do it poorly. So the point is, he's going to do it. Now, as I mentioned, we don't know what he's going to do between now and then. And we don't know what whether he's going to stay true to his statement, right? In theory, he could change his mind. This has happened before. There is historical precedent for Trump changing his mind. But I want to talk a little bit about how we got here, right? And one thing that's really important to understand is who did this. And you already have people in Congress and on TV suggesting that this was Antifa, which is just mind-boggling, and should be just as roundly condemned as all the rhetoric that got us here, right? This is exactly part of the fact denial, alternate reality that gets people to do this. If you think a fact is true, you are going to act as if it is true. That's what people did yesterday, right? That's what we all do. Assume everyone is acting according to a logic that makes sense to them based on the facts that they believe in. That's how you understand how humans work, right? And that would explain why people who call themselves patriots storm the US Capitol. Why? Because they think interlopers who have illegally taken over the US government are in there. In their minds, they're doing something heroic. They're horrific boobs, they're arrogant, and they're criminals, and they need to be prosecuted and found and arrested. But in their heads, right, this is the story in writing. Everyone's the hero of their own story. So if you want to understand someone's motivations, try to see how they think they're doing well. But, and that's what Matt Gaetz and others are doing when they say, oh, this was Antifa. They think they're calling out an important truth. But the same media that let them get away with, and that's a phrase I hate because how do you not let them get away with? But at a minimum, you call them out, right? At a minimum, you call them out. So saying it was Antifa is just as dangerous as the rhetoric that got us to yesterday. And here's where the media are falling down again. I was watching CNN yesterday, and the phrase anarchist was used repeatedly to talk about these people. I'm not a political science whiz, but an anarchist is someone who does not believe in top-down government. The people who stormed the Capitol yesterday clearly believe in top-down government. They were very specific in their banners and their rhetoric that they wanted Trump at the top and everyone else down. Not only that, they were carrying signs that said Jesus saves, Nancy Pelosi is Satan, thou shalt not steal. They erected a cross. So these are not anarchists. These are white, Republican. They had Trump signs and Trump merch all over the place. White, Republican, Christian, dominionist, autocrats, theocrats, right? Political science has no shortage of labels for these people. Anarchist is not one of them. So the media owns yesterday, and so do the politicians. And it was horrific to see the politicians who carried Trump 99.9% of the way to the finish line, the Mitch McConnells, the Mike Pences, the Lindsey Grahams. It was horrifying to see them lionize yesterday for doing the bare minimum. And now, only now, when one woman was dead and the US Capitol had to have been evacuated, now they can finally say, okay, Biden won. And what they're doing when they say that, Kelly Loeffler, right? She said, in light of the attack on the Capitol, she was now going to rescind her promised challenge to electoral college votes, right? She had said beforehand that I'm going to challenge these votes. After the attack, she said she would not. One thing should have nothing to do with the other. If it's true that the votes were fraudulent, you should still challenge them, regardless of whether a mob of criminal nut jobs does something bad, right? You only change your rhetoric if you believe that your rhetoric was A, responsible for something, and B, if it wasn't true. So it was a good litmus test to see who walked back and who didn't. The ones who didn't walk back, they're clearly true believers. The ones who did walk back, they've just confessed to months of gaslighting people who believe in them, gaslighting the media, lying to everyone, conning everyone. Essentially, what's happened here from Trump on down is that no one thought that people were really believing them. And you could see this in the demeanor of the mob yesterday, right? The idea to some of them that this was a game, this was a goof. What kind of coup takes over the capital of the country that they're trying to save and or take over? They take over the capital, and what's their first agenda? To seize the levers of power, right? Do they take hostages and demand control of the military? Do they have anyone trying to take over the TV stations? What they do is they take selfies. They storm into Nancy Pelosi's office and they steal office stationery. And then here's the beauty part. They leave of their own accord. It was the ultimate nihilistic act. They were feeling aggrieved because something was happening that they didn't like, and they weren't feeling heard. And by heard, I mean they weren't getting their way, right? They've been heard. That's what happens when you cast a vote and they announce the total. They announcing the total is listening to you. This is your total. You've just been heard. We now know that 70 or 74 million, whatever it was, 70 million people voted for Trump. That's you being heard. That's what being heard looks like. We know the total number of your votes. What they don't like is that someone else spoke louder. More people had something different to say. And the fact that they felt this aggrieved after suffering nothing, when the people they voted against, literally the voters, have generations more to be aggrieved about, that is still ongoing today, that is still baked into our system today, and have never once done anything remotely like this, says something toxic about our character. And that's another point I'll bring up is Biden's speech. This is not who we are. This is not what America is. If we keep doing it, if we keep saying it, if we keep being it, then that's who we are. It doesn't mean that's all we are, but we have to stop looking at America and the American people as a fixed thing with a soul, right? I'm an atheist, so I reject the idea of a soul. It is not a useful metaphor for understanding how humans work or for understanding how nations of 320 million people work. There is no such thing as we are when it comes to a nation of 370 million. We're just about everything that you can imagine. The only question is how many of us are going to behave in those aberrant fringe ways. So this notion that we're not racist, when our founding documents have racism baked into them, explicitly baked into them, and sizable portions of our leadership have continued to exploit and discriminate against people on the basis of race, as well as other metrics, right? Sexual orientation, gender identity, any number of things, and I'm sure atheism, right? When that's been part and parcel, not of a fringe element, but of the mainstream. The Southern strategy was the Republican Party. Dixiecrats were the Democratic Party. This is not fringe. If you're going to grapple with who we are, and you're not willing to see that part of who we are, you're not going to solve the problem. And we don't need to. I made this point on Twitter last night. Honestly, I was doing great. This whole part about us needing to heal. There are two circumstances when you need to heal, right? You need to heal if you've been wounded from something external. That hasn't happened here, and I don't want to litigate Putin at the moment. What's happened here, regardless of whether Putin had anything to do with stoking it, what's happened here is the other thing that you need to heal from, which is disease or sickness, right? And if you want to say that America has to heal because it is sick, then you have to have the discussion. You have to have the diagnosis. If we are sick, tell me what the sickness is. And if there is a part of us that is irredeemable, that needs to be opsied, that needs to be taken out, right? You don't call for uniting with that part of you. No one says, I'm sick, I've got cancer, I've got to heal and unite with my cancer. What you do with cancer is you remove it, you kill it. And I'm not talking about literally killing people, but you reject the ideology. And it's not just the ideology of Nazism and racism and white supremacy, it's the ideology of universal tolerance for any idea. We've had, since I was young, and I am not young anymore, so we're talking about a while ago, since I was young, we've had this pernicious, toxic notion that everyone's opinions deserve respect. If that's true, then everyone's right about everything. And if you believe that everyone's opinions deserve respect, then you should agree that with my opinion when I say you're wrong. So it is inherently nonsensical notion. If everyone's ideas deserve respect, then so does the idea that not everyone's ideas deserve respect. And so what the left has to do is to start grappling with, we don't want to unite with people who cannot see reality, cannot see the wrongs that have been done and are systemically baked into our governing structures. We don't want to unite with them. We can try to rescue them, right? This was the left's project starting at least in the 70s, if not earlier, was to stop looking at criminals as enemies and start looking at them as people who could be redeemed and rescued from the path that they had found themselves on. And I'm okay with that. But at a minimum, as I said, you have to recognize that there's a sickness in America. You have to recognize that that's a real thing. And you have to be willing to say it's not good. It represents opinions that are not good, that are bad opinions, are illogical, are not fact-based, and are contrary to reality, right? The idea that for just even categorizing the idea that the election was stolen as an opinion, that's a category error, right? That's not an opinion. That's a statement, an assertion of factuality. And when someone says that, the correct response is to say, prove it. And if they're not good at proving it, you explain why. But it's not an opinion, it's an assertion of fact. And we've had years of the media enabling this stuff and other politicians enabling this stuff. And we're not at a point where it's going to get better. I will say, I'm going to end this on what I hope is an upbeat note. I worked for CNN on 9/11 here in New York City, and that was a traumatic event for everyone in the nation. Clearly, obviously, those people at Ground Zero, at the Pentagon, in Washington, and that's a quick side note, right? Is 20 years ago this year, Osama bin Laden sent 3 planes into the World Trade Center in New York and the Pentagon, and one that went down in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. We never knew definitively where that 4th plane was headed. It is widely believed in intelligence circles, and this is not some big secret, it's widely believed in intelligence circles that that plane was headed either for the White House or the US Capitol. 20 years after a plane full of passengers sacrificed their lives, or at least gave up any hope of surviving, and crashed the plane to save the US Capitol. 20 years later, supporters of the American president finished the job and attacked the US Capitol. My point about 9/11 was that it was deeply traumatizing to this country, so deeply traumatizing that we started believing in something called Homeland Security because we had an infantile response. Why? Because terrorism works. And so we acted out of fear. That's what terrorists want you to do. So because we were so afraid, we decided to root out evil across planet Earth, like a child might. And we decided that we needed to prioritize the security of our homeland over everything. The oath of office is not to keep the American people safe, it's to uphold the Constitution and defend the Constitution. We now have a childlike political sphere in which even Democrats routinely say that the president's first job is to keep us safe. That's a lie. It's nowhere in the job description. Obviously, it's a constituent piece of the job, right? The Constitution is meant to give us the mechanisms for establishing our safety. But the Constitution was written by grown-ups who understood that sometimes bad things happen, right? The entire project of America, right? Give me liberty or give me death, is specifically, explicitly putting liberty before death. We will be a free people, and we will not give up everything in the name of safety. Now, the way that usually gets heard is, we won't give up, we will fight to the death against external enemies. But we're surrounded by oceans, we're a very physically safe country, and it's been warped so that we don't recognize that give me liberty or give me death should also apply to our own decisions. But we were so traumatized by 9/11 that we put liberty second. And we said, Homeland Security, we need Homeland Security. Everything's a threat. Caravans of undocumented immigrants, they're a threat. We got to stop it. Meanwhile, no one's protecting the US Capitol. I saw that kind of trauma on the air yesterday among both the anchors and pundits and commentators and also the politicians. And here's where I think I have a slightly optimistic note to end on. And I shouldn't say that this video has been a bummer. Donald Trump just said he'll leave. That's a good thing. Early this morning, that came out on Twitter. The other good thing is that I think Democrats and commentators generally, and I think Republicans have internalized this to some extent, will no longer be glib about the use of rhetoric which leads to the conclusion that you must do something violent about it. In other words, the violence that we saw yesterday was the logical conclusion of the rhetoric we've heard out of the media and out of politicians. So I think that the Democrats and some of the Republicans that were there yesterday will, for the rest of their lives, remember that day. And for the rest of their lives, when they hear the rhetoric, the kind of rhetoric that got us to yesterday, I think they're going to call that out. And I think they are going to not stand for it. And the reason I think that's important is because I do think that some Republicans experienced shame and guilt about it. And I don't necessarily want to say that Mike Pence, Lindsey Graham, Mitch McConnell turned over a new leaf. I'm not saying that whatsoever. And I think the amount of praise they should get for doing the bare minimum right thing after doing 99.9% of the wrong thing is fractional and infinitesimal. And I think we should have been hearing way much more from people of color and people who've been right all along on the airwaves last night. It was white dudes talking about white dudes, as far as I could see on CNN. Not universally. I did see people of color out there, but there were times when I would flip it on, or turn my head and look at it, and it was a white dude interviewing another white dude and a Republican white dude. That said, I do think that there is going to be a collective sense that you cannot get away with that stuff as a joke anymore, which does not mean it's going to end, but it does mean that that's going to be much more reliable of a litmus test of who actually believes it. And that's the real legacy, is that the people who never believed it went along with it. The people who were giving anonymous quotes to Politico and the Washington Post saying, oh, he's gone nuts, but I can't do anything about it. Those people endorsed and helped elect the true believers who are now in office. So anyway, we have a lot of work to do. But in some ways, I think this is a positive thing in that it was the life lost was one of the people attacking. So be it. It's unfortunate, but that's not something that was their choice that they made. That was not something inflicted on them. There was property damage. There was a grievous insult to the national dignity. All of those things are real, but it was the kind of thing that, let's put it this way, to use an appropriate analogy, let's hope that serves as an inoculation, as a vaccine, right? We just got a shot of something that eventually could kill us if we don't learn how to defend against it. We got a little bit of it yesterday. And there are signs that taught some of the people, some of our defense mechanisms. That's what democracy is supposed to be, a system of defense mechanisms against tyranny, right? And they're supposed to fight with each other, right? The body is supposed to have immune systems against any one contingent becoming too strong. That vaccine we got yesterday, as much dangerous of a payload, of a viral load as it had, was not enough to overwhelm the body politic. And with luck, our defense system, our immune system, will have learned enough from it that we get better. I neglected to ask that all you folks subscribe to TYT Investigates. We try to do commentary and let you know, do videos when there is news breaking. So that's why I'm here. We do commentary. We put up videos of public remarks by public figures, so you can see them without an analysis or someone else blathering over them. We try to put up videos like that, and of course we do our reporting over at tyt.com/investigates. We just put up a new one this week, so I hope you'll go check that out. Subscribe to our channel, all that good stuff. Follow me on Twitter at JT Larson, and I apologize for not putting on the chat today so that I can see your comments, but I will look in the actual comments the thread of comments afterwards and respond there. So if you've got questions, if you've got pushback, feedback, I want to hear it, and I want to hear from you, and I want you to take care of each other and take care of yourselves. Bye now.